In this video, we're going to look at two different ways to represent intervals. Now, an interval is just a range of possible values. So the first way to represent intervals is by using inequalities. It says here you can represent ranges of numbers on a number line using inequalities. So I've given you 7 examples here. In each case, you can see that the number line has been shaded, right? A shade on a number line indicates that that value should be included. You can see that in all of these cases, except for 2, there's arrows on the end of the shading, and that's because the shading should go on forever and ever, just like a number line. If you look carefully, you'll notice a lot of these number lines either have open circles or closed circles. Open circles do not include the values that they themselves are sitting on, and closed circles do include the values. So if we go through these 7 number lines just real quickly here, we see that x is greater than 6. I put an open circle on 6 and I shaded to the right because everything to the right of the 6 is greater than 6. Our next example says x is greater than or equal to -2. So I put a closed circle on -2 and then I shaded everything to the right because everything to the right of -2 is greater than. X is less than 5, same thing as the other open circle. We're going to shade to the left because less than is to the left. X is less than or equal to 2. I put a closed circle on the 2 and then I shaded everything to the left. Now the bottom 3 are probably the 3 new ones here. This one says x is between -3 and 2 inclusive. The word inclusive means you should include those values. The opposite of that is exclusive, meaning you should not include those values. So I put a circle on -3, I put a circle on 2, and I shaded everything in between, and I made sure both of those circles were solid. They were filled in, they were closed, because I want to include both those numbers. And you can see there that what we have is a compound inequality. We have -3 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 2. Basically, that's saying that x needs to be between -3 and 2. The next one says x is between -8 and -3. Notice both of those have open circles because I can't actually include -8 or -3. And again, there's a compound inequality. X is between -8 and -3. And then the last one here says x is less than or equal to 0 or greater than 7. In this case, we're shading 2 different directions. There's just a small region in the middle that's not included, right? 0 or less is included. That's why I shaded on 0 and to the left. And then anything greater than 7 is included, and that's why I shaded to the right of 7. So that area in the middle that's not shaded was not included. And there's not one single inequality you can write these with. You have to put an or statement in the middle here. X is less than or equal to 0 or x is greater than 7. So that's inequality notation. There's one more notation we're going to talk about today, and that's interval notation. So interval notation does something very similar, but it uses parentheses and square brackets to represent the ranges. Parentheses, which are the rounded ones, means that the number directly next to it is not included. It's just a boundary. So in the first example here, there's a parenthesis next to a 6. That means that 6 is the boundary, but it's not actually included. And then you can see that in interval notation, we use the infinity symbol because we need some end for our interval. All intervals need a start and an end point. And if this goes on forever, well, we still need to indicate that there's an end point. So infinity is the end point, and infinity is a concept that never will end, right? So that's why that it's an open, it's a parenthesis, it's a rounded bracket. So you can see that a few of these examples have square brackets attached to the number. Like the second example has a square bracket attached to the -2. I think it says 2 there. It should say -2 there. Look at the fifth example. You can see that I used double square brackets. That's because both the start and end point need to be included. So it's interesting that some of these have mixed symbols, and some of these have two symbols of the same type, right? The bottom one, the middle one of the bottom row, it just looks like a point, -8 comma -3 with parentheses, but that's actually an interval. The only thing here that should stand out as new besides what we've talked about is the very last example. It says negative infinity through 0 is an interval, including 0. And then there's a U symbol. That's another way to say or in math. That's called a union. Sometimes you'll see people use the word or, and sometimes you'll see them use that little U symbol, and that means union, that means or. All right, so we've learned two different ways to represent ranges of values called intervals, one of which is inequalities, and the other of which is interval notation. Thanks for watching.